Hello, welcome to Quiz Time. I'm Jess, your quizmaster, and today our quiz is a little different. The topic is who was born first. So, how are you going to do? Let's find out. Who was born first? Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley, or Mahatma Gandhi? Mahatma Gandhi. Who was born first? Albert Einstein, Isaac Newton, or Marie Curie? Albert Einstein. Franklin D. Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt, or Abraham Lincoln? Which was born first? Abraham Lincoln. True or false? Michelangelo was born before Leonardo da Vinci. Is that true or is it false? It's false. Who was born first? Miguel de Cervantes, William Shakespeare, or Christopher Marlowe? Miguel de Cervantes. And of these, who was first born? Franklin D. Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, or Adolf Hitler? Winston Churchill. Who was born first? Leo Tolstoy, Charles Dickens, or Mark Twain? Mark Twain. Who was born first? Johann Sebastian Bach, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, or Ludwig van Beethoven? Johann Sebastian Bach. Who was born first? Charles Darwin, Gregor Mendel, or Louis Pasteur? Charles Darwin. Who was born first between Isaac Newton and Galileo Galilei? Isaac Newton. Who was born first between Malcolm X and Nelson Mandela? Nelson Mandela. Who was born first? Carl Jung, Sigmund Freud, or Alfred Adler? Sigmund Freud. Who was born first? Albert Einstein, Marie Curie, or Niels Bohr? Marie Curie. Who was born first? Cleopatra, Julius Caesar, or Augustus? Cleopatra. Who was born first? Claude Monet, Pablo Picasso, or Vincent van Gogh? Vincent van Gogh. Who was born first, Plato, Aristotle, or Socrates? Aristotle. Hannibal, Alexander the Great, and Julius Caesar. Which one was born first? Hannibal. Who was born first, Max Weber, Friedrich Nietzsche, or Karl Marx? Karl Marx. Out of Queen Elizabeth I, King Louis XIII, and Peter the Great, who was born first? Queen Elizabeth I. Sorry, that's King Louis XIV. I hate Roman numerals. How are you with them? Who was born first, Richard the Lionheart, William the Conqueror, or King John? William the Conqueror. Who was born first, William Langland, Geoffrey Chaucer, or Dante Alighieri? Dante Alighieri. Who was born first between Ludwig van Beethoven and Franz Schubert? Ludwig van Beethoven. Who was born first, Andrew Jackson, Napoleon Bonaparte, or Simon Bolivar? Napoleon Bonaparte. Who was born first, Harriet Tubman, Susan Anthony, or Elizabeth Stanton? Harriet Tubman. Who was born first, John Milton, Christopher Marlowe, or William Shakespeare? Christopher Marlowe. Out of Voltaire, John Locke, and Isaac Newton, who was born first? Isaac Newton. Who was born first, Thomas Edison, Alexander Graham Bell, or Nikola Tesla? Thomas Edison. Who was born first, Nikola Tesla, Max Planck, or Albert Einstein? Albert Einstein. Who was born first, William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, or Lord Byron? William Wordsworth. Who was born first between Leo Tolstoy and Fyodor Dostoevsky? Leo Tolstoy. Who was born first? John Steinbeck, Ernest Hemingway, or F. Scott Fitzgerald? F. Scott Fitzgerald. Who was born first? Florence Nightingale, Clara Barton, or Marie Curie? Florence Nightingale. Who was born first? Alexander Graham Bell, Thomas Edison, or Nikola Tesla? Thomas Edison. How are you doing with these? Who was born first? Abraham Lincoln, Charles Darwin, or Karl Marx? Abraham Lincoln. Who was born first? Baruch Spinoza, Blaise Pascal, or René Descartes? René Descartes. Who was born first? Franz Schubert, Ludwig van Beethoven, or Hector Berlioz? Ludwig van Beethoven. Henry II, Richard I, or William the Conqueror? Which of those ones was born first? William the Conqueror. Who was born first? Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, or Raphael? Leonardo da Vinci. Who was born first? Daniel Defoe, Alexander Pope, or Jonathan Swift? Jonathan Swift. Which of these was born first? Abraham Lincoln, Queen Victoria, or Ulysses S. Grant? Queen Victoria. Who was born first? Johann Brahms, Ludwig van Beethoven, or Richard Wagner? Ludwig van Beethoven. Who was born between Cleopatra and Augustus? Who was born first between Cleopatra and Augustus? Cleopatra. Okay, another one. Frank Kafka, James Joyce, or Marcel Proust? Who was born first? James Joyce. Between Genghis Khan and Kublai Khan, who was first born? Genghis Khan. Who was born first? Charles Darwin, Thomas Huxley, or Alfred Russel Wallace? Alfred Russel Wallace. Out of Adam Smith, Thomas Malthus, and David Ricardo, who was born first? Adam Smith. Who was born first? Alexander Graham Bell, Samuel Morse, or Thomas Edison? Samuel Morse. Who was born first? James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, or James Monroe? Thomas Jefferson. Who was born first? Isaac Newton, John Locke, or John Milton? John Milton. Between Victor Hugo and Charles Dickens, who was born first? Victor Hugo. Your halfway point, how are you doing? Who was born first? Johann Kepler, Galileo Galilei, or Pablo Picasso? Galileo Galilei. Who was born first? Ray Bradbury, Aldous Huxley, or George Orwell? Aldous Huxley. Who was born first? Salvador Dali, Pablo Picasso, or Joan Miro? Pablo Picasso. Out of William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor, Coleridge, and Lord Byron, who was the first? William Wordsworth. Who was born first? Johannes Gutenberg, Leonardo da Vinci, or Michelangelo? Johannes Gutenberg. Who was born first? George Berkeley, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, or Isaac Newton? Isaac Newton. Who was born first? William Blake, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, or Lord Byron? William Blake. Who was first born? Carl Jung, Sigmund Freud, or Alfred Adler? Sigmund Freud. Who was born first out of the following three men? William Shakespeare, Miguel de Cervantes, and Christopher Marlowe. Which one was first born? William Shakespeare. Who was first born here? Isaac Newton, Blaise Pascal, or Galileo Galilei? Isaac Newton. Who was born first? Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, or John Adams? George Washington. Who was born first? Simon Bolivar, Andrew Jackson, or Napoleon Bonaparte? Napoleon Bonaparte. Who was born first? Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, or Harold Lloyd? Charlie Chaplin. Okay, C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien, or Agatha Christie? Which one was born first? J.R.R. Tolkien. Out of John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and George Harrison, which one of those was born first? Paul McCartney. Who was born first? Jimi Hendrix, Bob Dylan, or Janis Joplin? Janis Joplin. Who was born first from these three? H.G. Wells, George Orwell, or Aldous Huxley? You think it's the same question, but they're all mixed up again. Some familiar names coming up again. It was H.G. Wells. Who was first born from these three? Harry S. Truman, Franklin D. Roosevelt, or Dwight D. Eisenhower? Franklin D. Roosevelt. Between Henry Ford and Thomas Edison, who was born first? Henry Ford. Who was born first? Jim Henson, Walt Disney, or Stan Lee? Walt Disney. Who was born first? Ray Bradbury, Isaac Asimov, or Arthur C. Clarke? Arthur C. Clarke. Out of Audrey Hepburn, Grace Kelly, and Marilyn Monroe, who was born first? Audrey Hepburn. Who was first born? Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, or Elon Musk? A few more up to date. Which was born first? Elon Musk. Who was born first? Humphrey Bogart, Clark Gable, or Cary Grant? Or quite frankly, could you not give a damn? It was Humphrey Bogart. Who was first born out of Michael Jackson and Prince? Both amazingly talented artists. But who was first born? Michael Jackson. Who was first born here? Oprah Winfrey, Steve Jobs, or Bill Gates? Are the more modern names more easy? What do you think? Bill Gates. Or do you prefer your historical ones? Who was born first? Toni Morrison, Maya Angelou, or Alice Walker? Maya Angelou. Between Nina Simone and Billie Holiday, who was born first? Billie Holiday. Who was born first? Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, or Benito Mussolini? Joseph Stalin. Who was born first? Jackson Pollock, Georgia O'Keeffe, or Frida Kahlo? Frida Kahlo. Who was born first? Charlotte Bronte, Emily Bronte, or Jane Austen? Jane Austen. And out of Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Yuri Gagarin, who was born first? Buzz Aldrin. John D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, or JP Morgan? Which was the one that was first born in this group? John D. Rockefeller. Who was first born? Franklin D. Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, or Harry S. Truman? Winston Churchill. Who was first born? Louis Gehrig, Babe Ruth, or Joe DiMaggio? Babe Ruth. Between Amelia Earhart and Charles Lindbergh, who was born first? Amelia Earhart. Booker T. Washington, George Washington Carver, or W.E.B. Du Bois? Which one of those was born first? George Washington Carver. True or false? Thomas Paine was born before James Madison. Is that true or is it false? It's true. Between Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, and George Foreman, who was born first? Muhammad Ali. Who was born first? Shawn Mendes, Billie Eilish or Ariana Grande? A modern one here, is that good for you or is that more difficult? Ariana Grande. Who was born first? Robert Redford, Paul Newman or Steve McQueen? Hope you're enjoying this quiz, getting you thinking more. It was Paul Newman. Who was first born? Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris or Jackie Chan? Bruce Lee. And Carl Sagan, Stephen Hawking, Richard Feynman. Who was born first? Stephen Hawking. Who was born first? Orson Welles, Stanley Kubrick or Alfred Hitchcock? Alfred Hitchcock. Out of Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson and Chris Christopherson, who was born first? Johnny Cash. Who was first born here? Jane Mansfield, Zsa Zsa Gabor or Marilyn Monroe? Zsa Zsa Gabor. Who was first born here? Stan Lee, Hergé or Walt Disney? Walt Disney. Who was born first? Aaron Copland, Leonard Bernstein or John Cage? Aaron Copland. Who was born first? Stephen King, Anne Rice or Dean Koontz? Dean Koontz. And your last one. From the following, who was born first? Johannes Gutenberg, Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo? Who was born first? It was Johannes Gutenberg. So how did you do on the Born First quiz? Drop your score in the comments below. And also, who was born first, you or me? I was 1975. Drop me or you in the comments below. And join us next time on Quiz Time.